I've not been very prepared for the April albums of the month. There's been a lot going on. I've been struggling with my mental health, I've been struggling with balancing work and my uploads, but I'm still doing what I can do. If I'm not uploading as much, I'm normally trying to save as many albums for this. So I probably won't talk in depth as much as some of my other videos for these, but that's just a little heads up precaution. There's still a bunch of stuff I want to cover, and there's a lot of stuff in April that has been interesting to say the least. So as always with the April albums of the month, I'll be talking about albums that I haven't been able to do a full video for, and just put it on here, just give it a quick little analysis, just to kind of give you my brief opinion on it, and kind of show you where I'd put it, whether it be a weak album, a one that's okay, and then you got one that, well, it could be a really good one. So, enough with my stuttering and mispronunciations. We'll start with the worst, and basically go through all that to the alright albums, to then the best. So, let's start off with the worst albums. We got a new one by Young Medicine. This one is Cold Blooded. I've been a fan of Young Medicine for a good few years. I remember the Interlinked album, and I honestly had a little bit of fun with it. But this one, honestly, I just don't like this album very much. I think the mixing and production is very off. A lot of the sound just gets drowned into the electronics, and some of the instrumentation just barely lives up to the hype anyway. So when you hear some of the guitars, it just feels kind of bland. The hooks don't really stand out very much, and I think a lot of this just kind of feels like mediocre Young Medicines, to be honest. I'd much rather listen to Interlinked. Some okay songs. I think it just kind of intertwines with some weaker stuff and some of the better stuff, so it's kind of like sparse where you get the good material. But even the Parasocial track, which featured Essenger, which is home to one of the best songs, Lost Boys, which Young Medicine featured on from Essenger, even their appearance here just didn't really save the song it's on. It's a very mixed album, with some good ideas and a lot of weak stuff. I'm gonna have to give it a 2 out of 5. It's not really that good. The Zutons, The Big Decider, is kind of a weak record in my opinion. It doesn't really have the amazing big ideas that they used to have back into some of their earlier hits like Valerie. When it comes for them trying to push for newer stuff, it just comes off very mainstream and generic. There is not really any nuance to pushing for anything big. Like, sure, you can have brass instruments to kind of work with the funk, but again, it doesn't really solidify that. The writing just kind of feels stale at this point for what the band's going for. A very, very unversatile record with a lot of the similar ideas, quite repetitive, and whatever it's going for isn't really catching up to pull you in. So I find this album kind of disappointing, to be honest. I'll give it a 2 out of 5. So now that we've talked about the weakest records of the month that I haven't been able to do a separate video on, let's move on to the ones that I think are just alright. Basically the sort of in the middle-ish ones. The normal ranking for this would be around 2.5 out of 5, so I don't really need to list it here anyway. But let's see which albums have just been alright. We're going down in Ohio with the brand new one by the Black Keys, Ohio Players. I was going to do a full review, but I didn't really have much else to say, so I think it's better just to kind of quickly talk about it here. It's a fine record in my opinion. It's got some ambitious ideas, but for the most part it just kind of stays stagnant with a very similar lenient approach that we've had with the last few records. I will be honest, I prefer the last few. Dropout Boogie is a bit stronger than this one. The highs on this one are decent, but they're not too high. Nothing really to make me go out of my way to listen to this one again. I think it's a good listen for what it is, but you don't really get much from it, especially towards the second half. You get the best songs right away, and then you kind of just, you're stuck with whatever you have. Beck being a feature was something I was interested in, but Paper Crown doesn't necessarily live up to the hype of what I wanted it to be. But otherwise than that, it's an alright album. Don't really have much else to say than that. The new one by Accept, the German heavy metal band, is alright. I feel like there's some good songs on here, especially with some of the singles being great, like Humanoid and Frankenstein, but I gotta be honest, the whole album is not a consistently fun listen. I find some of it just to feel a bit too generic and a bit too butt rock for the this band. And while there's some great ideas as a whole, the riffs are even kind of uninspired, and there's not really anything that drives or breaks new ground with new ideas. It just kind of feels like something that the band has done before. Nothing engaging, but at the same time it's a decent listen, I suppose, so it's alright in my opinion. Another alright one in my opinion is the Mortal Binding, the brand new one by My Dying Bride. This record is decent, like it definitely has some good cuts, but I think as a whole, the album I just don't think carries the best sound towards the... I don't think the album carries the best sound towards the end. Like, Her Dominion and Thornwick Hymn is probably some of my stronger tracks, but I definitely enjoy the long, lengthy, the Apocalyptist, as well as the second of Three Bells. There's a bunch of good stuff towards it, but I think towards the end it just kind of falls apart, and I would have put this in the good, but to me, I felt like even the strongest stuff is not as interesting to me. Like, I do enjoy the aesthetic, and I think the sound's great. They definitely got some great vocals and instrumentation, but I think as a whole, it just feels like it's missing something, or just a little something to fully get into that doom death metal sound. Like, for me, it's definitely an alright good record, but overall, I don't want to say it's quite as good as I wanted it to be. It's still a listen, very listenable album though, so that's why it's here. Another alright album we have is the brand new one by Blue Oyster Cult, Ghost Stories. So this one was pretty much a collection of older songs, but they were more or less polished to kind of sound like their newer stuff. But this was pretty much a lot of this stuff was pretty much reimagined around from the 70s to 80s. So a lot of old material being like taken out of the vault and re-put onto a record. I don't mind that. I don't mind if bands do that, because maybe they had to get an album out quicker, or they just wanted to do that just to give their older songs a chance. But you can definitely tell why these ones weren't really the ones they had on albums, because this definitely is one of the weaker records from the discography. I think for Blue Oyster Cult, this doesn't really hit in the same way that some of the best material do, so you're kind of just stuck with, a bunch of weaker tracks. I know it's really hard to make your best album out of a bunch of scrap songs, but I mean, Static X still managed to make a really good record out of or two good records, just as a compilation of numerous songs that were written back in the day but didn't quite make the cut, and I think stuff like that has been doing quite well for them. But yeah, for Blue Oyster Cult, it is a fine listen. I'd give it a listen if you're a huge fan of the sound, but otherwise it's just stuff that you think's fine, but there's not really much to it than that. It's alright. Finally, let's move on to the best albums of the month, the ones that I think are either just good or incredible. These basically vary between that range, and let's hope we get some pretty good ones on this list. So yeah, let's kick off the last bit of the video. The new one by the Norwegian black metal band that's kind of developed more of a doom metal style, Darkthrone, has released a new record, Beckons Us All, which I must say, I'm liking the doom metal direction the band's been taking it. I think there's some great ideas. I think as a whole, the listens for the more recent stuff has actually been kind of intriguing to me. This album is nothing spectacular though. I feel like this kind of scratches the doom metal itch the fans of the Darkthrone enjoy, but at the same time, I don't think this one necessarily pushes into just some creative, fantastic ideas. It just kind of continues this newer direction the band's kind of developing, and it's not necessarily pushing higher, but it's still pushing onwards, more progression in some of the better stuff I think the band's been writing. The Bird People of Nordland is a song that stood out to me. This one's definitely one of my favourites. I just love the instrumentation, I love the overall way this one is structured. Even Howling Primitive Colonies, this one definitely is a good way to start, and Eon 3 just kind of continues on with just probably one of the most fun drives of the song on the record. It's not a perfect album though. I feel like some of the songs just kind of drag on a bit for some of the ideas they have, but for what it's worth, it's definitely a fun album. I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. It is a good listen. Another album we have for the best is the brand new one by Foxblood, Whalefall. So this has been in the making since 2020. Some of the singles got released then, but then they started releasing singles for Dissociation Vacation. I'm assuming this is because one of the band members did leave, and the direction that that record took was a very odd one, not gonna lie. I think it was a lot more lenient to an electronic hard rock than it is to the metalcore sound that Foxblood have had, but this is pretty much a sort of return back to form. Some groovy bangers on this one, and I must say, while a lot of this stuff has been out for years, I haven't really listened to Foxblood in a while, so this is my first listen in ages, well, at least since the Dissociation Vacation, as I only listened to the album, and the album before, Grief and Mercy Sleep, are the ones that I'm more familiar with, but this is a really strong album, and probably my favourite from Foxblood in general. I like this comeback. It feels like they've made a triumphant return. Every song is just incredible, some great instrumentation, some great vocals. They definitely managed to grab what I liked about them the first time they explored the discography, and they just completely nail it. Tracks like Nepotism, Charlatan Blues, Ghost and Bones, just everything on this record is just fantastic. Even Time Flies in July is a great way to start off this record. I didn't know what to give this one, honestly, because I feel like if I gave it a 4.5, I'd be a little too, I don't know, I'd just say it's a little too much for it. But I'd happily give this a very high 4 out of 5. This is a really strong record. If you haven't heard of Foxblood, I'm not surprised. They're not very big, but I definitely recommend it because this album is fantastic. It's a really good album. One of my favourites this year, I will say that. Melvins' new record, Tarantula Heart, is a pretty good one. In fact, probably one of the better albums on this, or in this video at least. I like the direction they took this one. They definitely go for that doom sludge metal to a T in a great way. You get the long, almost 20-minute track, Pain Equals Funny, which I will be honest, does drag on a little bit. I mean, 20-minute tracks can work, but to me, it just feels like it kind of has, a great direction for the first half of the song, and it then just tries to do whatever it wants to continue with it. But minus that song dragging on a bit, in my opinion, I think the other tracks are fantastic. She's Got Weird Arms, this one was just definitely one of the ones that stood out to me, just a fun song, but the instrumentation is great. The production sounds pretty disgusting for the direction they're going for, so yeah, it's a all-around good album, probably one of the best albums Melvin's done in a while, although it is funny to me that the first track is pretty much basically acts as the first half of the album, and then the last 4 tracks are pretty much that. It could literally be an EP if that song didn't exist, but it's an album, and I think it's a pretty good one. So we got a new double album by the alt-rock band Feeder, Black Red. So I kind of went into this one blind. The only tracks I actually knew from this record was Playing With Fire and ELF, mainly because these are the ones that I've seen on Kerrang, I believe. At least with Playing With Fire, I remember this one, but yeah, this is all pretty much a new experience. From my listen of Feeder and dabbling with the band, I think they've got some great sounds, some great records, and Black Red, it's a good one, but I think it kind of ends up being disappointing. The black half of the record is probably the strongest, but I still feel like some of the weaker tracks kind of remain on this bit. I don't think they quite push for their best sound, but at the same time, there's a lot of great songs. When you can go from tracks like Elf to Playing With Fire, even to some of my favourites like AI Man, there's a lot of creative ideas that I'm surprised to even hear from a band like this. Feeder I just kind of think of, as a mainstream radio rock band, but they definitely managed to bring out some good ideas throughout this, and the black section of this record, or at least the Black album, is a pretty concrete listen. I think there could be some better ideas, as I mentioned, but all of it's good. The Red portion of the album is very interesting, because I think the first 4 songs, or at least the first 3, are pretty strong. They're some of the best songs that I've heard on the record, I'd probably say, especially Sleeping Dogs Lie and Scream are some pretty good ones. But unfortunately, the album just kind of tankers, and when you get to Lost in the Wilderness, I just kind of completely fall away from this record. I find a lot of this just to feel more basic, more mainstream oriented, rather than having a pure focus. I feel like, honestly, this shouldn't have been a double album, and they should have just taken the best songs of Red and put it with Black, or at least like kind of mix it up. I feel like because there's too many songs and the Red portion just kind of dumbs down the ideas that the Black portion has, I just don't really vibe with it as much. But yeah, honestly, it's a good album. I think I'll have to give it a 3 out of 5 though. I was a bit disappointed with the Red portion, but as a whole, it's still a good album. There's still a bunch of songs I like, so it makes it on this bit. Hard rock veterans Gun have released a brand new record, Hombres, which I think is an interesting record. It definitely has that sound of theirs to a T. They continue the hard rock direction but make it a little bit more accessible. I feel like this is an album that probably would pick up a lot more fans than they currently have. I think it's decent, but for what it goes for, it's not too bad. As I mentioned, it is decent, but I find there's 1 or 2 songs I don't really vibe with that much. But the rest of the record, I think it's a good listen. I don't really have any strong opinions on the Gun here, but from the overall album, I think the instrumentation's good. I think the vocals work well, and just some fun little. Just a fun album in some cases as well, so I don't really have anything else to say. It's a 3 out of 5 for me. It's decently good. Alright, first of all, the album art sucks. I hate when bands use AI for their album art. It's just lazy. What happened to the days where we could just take a picture of something creative, or have someone make some juicy art? I don't know, but yeah, this AI shit is just terrible. The album itself is good though, quite good actually. It's definitely one of the best death metal albums I've heard this year so far. It's got a really fun drive. I just love the intensity this one has. Definitely consists with great vocals once again. The production sounds crisp and everything's mixed quite well. Sever the Tongue, Ritual, Deicide, and Banished By Sin are some of my favourite tracks. I just love the drumming on these especially. There's a lot of fun moments to be had with this record. Just wish the album art was better, and I also feel like some of the other songs could be a bit stronger, but as a whole it is still a good listen. I'm going to give it a 3.5 out of 5. I definitely recommend this one. And that is every album of April reviewed. It's been a bit short this month when it comes to stuff I wanted to talk about, so there hasn't been too many in this video as there has been for last, and I haven't even covered that many albums this month, because normally I was rapid fire in these, but with my new job I'm not able to really get anything done between the 4 days I'm working, so when I'm not working that's when I'm getting more shit done. But yeah, honestly, April has been an interesting month. We've definitely had some great releases for sure, and this video, while I haven't really had anything phenomenal onto this video, still some really good bangers, especially Foxblood as well. But yeah, that's my review. Hope you enjoy, and let's see what May brings.